We're going to be using aliases on this job. Under no circumstances do I want any one of you to relate to each other by your Christian names. And I don't want any talk about yourself personally. That includes where you've been, your wife's name, where you might have done time, or a bank maybe you robbed in, say, Petersburg. All I want you guys to talk about, if you have to, is what you're gonna do. That should do it. Here are your names. Mr. Brown, Mr. White, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Blue, Mr. Orange, and Mr. Pink.
Why am I Mr. Pink?
Because you're a faggot, all right?
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 101, can you believe it, of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I've got Mr. Blonde over here and Mr. Beige over there.
It's Mr. Bond.
Dave Bond.
Can you believe we got here? Yeah, they've been listening to our self-congratulatory fucking victory tour for the last month. So I'm sure they're well aware we've just passed episode 100.
That's amazing.
Hello, welcome to episode 101 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? Tonight we'll be discussing the debut film of Quentin Tarantino, Reservoir Dogs, starring Harvey Keitel and Tim Roth. Joining us today is host Rebecca Andrews and David Bond and Chris. Yeah, sorry, is that the impression that you're going for?
That's your Steven Wright, is it?
Yeah, that's my Steven Wright. And hello, listeners. Mr. Beige
Steven
here.
Wright had nasal issues and was from Manchester.
Yes. Wait, he's not?
No, he's from Salford.
Oh, okay. Makes all the difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was going to try and do an impression, but I thought it was shit, and then Chris came out and did one, and I thought, oh, that's amazing, do that.
I was listening to that warm-up session. At no point did I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I
thought it was quite funny.
It was my impression, and even I was like thinking maybe amazing is a bit of a stretch.
Even though
the thing is, you started and you did a few seconds, and I was thinking, "Fuck me, that's not working at all." And Becca went, "That's amazing," and I'm like, "What am I listening to?"
If you did it with an American accent, then it would be amazing. But because you're doing it with your normal accent, it does sound a bit like as if he is via Manchester.
Well, he only does bored. That's his only accent, is bored.
That's it. I brought Spartan over on my dog, and now he's gone. And that's about it. And I can't do it.
I don't know.
I can't do it.
No, you can't.
I am a toaster. Do what I say. I could do the talkie toaster impression, but that has no relation whatsoever.
Well, would you like a piece of toast?
I don't fucking want a piece of fucking toast.
Would you like some toast?
Oh, sorry.
It's like a bacon and a crumpet, isn't it?
Oh, fucking hell. This is the worst intro ever. No, you're not match fit, Becca. You haven't introed a show for a while, have you?
No, I'm not. I'm left out a little bit. Anyway, also, Happy New Year.
I'm just checking when this goes out. Yes, it will be the first one of the new year. Yes, Happy New Year.
This is the first podcast we have recorded in the first week of January 2018.
Well, yeah, it's just we did one. I remember doing one for Your Eyes Only a few years ago, and you said to us, "Should I wish everyone Happy New Year?" But we still thought Chris was going to edit that, so the thought occurred it would be put out in March. So we said no. But this will be out on about the 5th or 6th. So yeah, Happy New Year.
We are in time. Happy New Year. Let's hope it's better than that shitstorm that was 2017. Bloody hell. Anyway, so yes, listeners, you are joining us on a new embarkation as we go through the films of Quentin Tarantino. So we are starting with Reservoir Dogs, starring Harvey Keitel, Michael Madson, Tim Roth, Chris Penn, who sadly isn't with us anymore, Steve Buscemi, Lawrence Tierney, and Edward Bunker, and Tarantino himself. Written and directed by Tarantino and released in 1992.
Not the only two that aren't with us anymore. Lawrence Tierney and Eddie Bunker are dead now as well.
Oh yes, they passed away, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, they did. Although they were older gentlemen at the time of filming here. Chris Penn died at the age of 40.
To be fair. But no, this is very interesting. I think I was trying to go through, like, because I came across this film via AS Film Studies back in the day, and I was trying to find all my old notes, and I'm pretty sure I've got film notes on the rest of it somewhere, but I've got nothing. So just as well.
I'm just waiting forward to some really basic. I'm looking forward to your observation about diegetic music in a bit.
No, that's all I know, but that's about it. I'm saying literally that's my knowledge of this film in a nutshell. Because I think after Kill Bill, I got a bit bored of Tarantino, and I kind of thought, well, I'll just
You'll have to steal
sign into the bin of history. So.
Well beyond Kill Bill. Although we are only going as far as his directorial efforts at the moment, so 9 films in this series. That will be Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill Volume 1, Kill Bill Volume 2, Death Proof, Inglourious Bastards,
Django Unchained,
and The Hateful Eight.
Yeah, we're not doing True Romance because Dave hates that film.
Also from Dusk Till Dawn, thank God for that.
I would have happily done that. The trouble is, you can't rule out True Romance on the basis of, well, he didn't direct it, and then get From Dusk Till Dawn in, which has pissed me off now because I've sacrificed one I like because of one I hate. There you go.
It's a fair trade, though, isn't it? I guess.
I'm not a big
It's
fan
a fair
of
trade,
Dusk
to
Till
be
Dawn,
honest.
so I'm like, yes.
I am only interested in what he directed, if I'm honest. I mean, like or hate True Romance, it doesn't feel like a Tarantino film. It feels like a copy of a Tarantino film, largely because it is another director coming along and doing it and thinking he was making the Red Shoe Diaries or something, but that was Tony Scott all over. I'm not a fan of that film. I know a lot of people love it, but I've always kind of found it... I was about to apologise if anyone listening holds that opinion, but actually, bollocks to you. I honestly think if you think True Romance is the best film he's ever done, you're being edgy for the sake of it, because it fucking well isn't.
Crimson Tide's probably the best film he's done.
Crimson Tide's pretty good, to be fair. That's the best Star Trek film of the last 25 years.
But we have to do a Scott retrospective as well, I think.
Well, what of the brothers?
Well, I'm not doing Tony Scott. Honestly, I will burst within about 3 films because I can't stand the guy's work at all.
Oh.
Really?
I like 2 or 3, and Crimson Tide's probably the best of them.
Or we could pick some films that we really do hate with a passion.
Well, I mean, the thing with Crimson Tide is it's really sloppy because I watched it for Pick a Flick, right? And there were 2 films that night, and the other one was Eyes Wide Shut. So I was following a Kubrick film with a Tony Scott film. Now, Kubrick, every scene was very deliberate. When you go to watch a Tony Scott film afterwards, you realise how sloppy he is. I didn't rate him as a filmmaker at all. I know he had a certain pop culture popularity, but I didn't like him. But Crimson Tide's one of his better efforts.
He's very much like part of that music video MTV kind of style directors. Yes. They're not a thing. I don't like Michael Bay either. Like Tony Scott, he has a very good visual eye. I mean, like
talking about Tony Scott.
Yeah, I think his probably penultimate film. It was his opening film. Really, the one that broke him out was Top Gun, and that's probably his.
Oh, hang on, The Hunger was years before that.
Yeah, no, I mean the film that broke him.
Are you talking about the film that popularised?
Yeah. Basically, where we're kind of like his intro to the world,
which is basically I've got no problem with people of any sexuality, but Top Gun is the most homoerotic wet dream in the world. And what made me laugh is we used to make films based on like books or short stories, novellas, that sort of thing. Top Gun was based on the optioning of a photograph. I hate that film.
Great blockbuster though, does its job. But yeah, it's very.
What job's that? I suppose I rented it. I suppose they got some money out of me. That did its job. Didn't like it.
Yeah.
Didn't like it. It's all this American fucking best of the best of the best of the best of the best. Fuck off.
It's very 80s. Very 80s.
And frankly, I think everyone would have calmed down a bit if Maverick and Iceman had just fucked early in the film and got it over with.
Yeah.
All this bollocks about hanging around with Kelly McGillis, you're just fooling yourself.
Anyway, should we talk about Tarantino while we're here?
Oh yeah, Quentin Tarantino. Yeah. I'm giddy. This is the most excited I've been about a retrospective since we did Rocky. I can pay all the lip services to the Star Wars of this world, and I do love them. But so far, if you were to rank my excitement for the series we've done, it would sort of be Bond, Rocky, and this. I've really been looking forward to getting to this, and I expect, on a personal basis, to be much more positive. I expect to be the most positive of the three of us on average through this series. And I think of the 9 films we're going to cover, I think 6 of them are absolutely outstanding. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, the thing is, I always look forward to whenever Tarantino brings out anything. Even though I do have my criticisms, as I always do, as everyone knows. But again, it's largely down to I want him to be better than he is, because I know he can be so much better. We'll get to Jackie Brown. That's my favourite. And there are even scenes in Glorious Bastards where I just think the guy is a master, and you just think that the films could have been so much better if he just edited himself or just disciplined himself.
We haven't encountered anyone with this peak level yet.
Yeah. At
all. And I think on average, if you had to give me someone's filmography, we've covered a lot of Spielberg. I'd take Spielberg over Tarantino. Of course I would. The guy is possibly the greatest American filmmaker. But there are moments of genius this guy meets.
I think
I don't know anyone else does.
I think the thing with Tarantino is he's a guy who never went to film school, never did any of that. He literally just watched movies and wrote screenplays. Literally, he's
self-taught, isn't he?
He is pretty much like.
Well, what that allowed him to do was avoid that awkward fucking film studies phase of a filmmaker's career. I'm not going to knock film school, by the way, because I think there must be an awful lot they learn that we never do, for example. But even if you go and look at the early, I mean, the director he's most commonly compared to is probably Martin Scorsese, which I think is kind of lazy because they sort of work vaguely in the crime genre. I'm not sure. I think they're that similar. I think it's like comparing Nolan to Kubrick. They're not that similar, but there's a superficial stylistic thing, and that's about it.
I always think Tarantino is his own thing. I mean, I think comparing to Scorsese, I mean, even Scorsese doesn't do, I only do gangster films. You actually look for his body of work. He does all kinds of shit.
Well, he's done stuff like The Age of Innocence and stuff like that, which is,
Hugo,
which was not
Wolf
only
of
a
Wall
period.
Street, all these things.
Hugo was a master filmmaker, though, in terms of shot making and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when you look at Quentin Tarantino, if I look at this was his first film. Now, I know he shot bits and pieces of something else that never came out, wrote other things, but he sprung kind of fully formed. And there are things in this film that I think, that's a younger filmmaker, or that's a younger man's opinion on certain things. But he springs effectively fully formed. Now, if you go and look at, say, Martin Scorsese, I think if you go back to his early films with Harvey Keitel, actually, something like Who's That Knocking at My Door? It looks like a student film. It does. Tarantino never looked like a student filmmaker, probably because he was never a film student. He sprung fairly fully formed. And yes, Quentin Tarantino's first film is Reservoir Dogs, and he was about 29 when it was released, about 28 while they were shooting it. So it's going to be different from the man he is today. At the time of recording this, Quentin Tarantino is a couple of months away from 55. So it's going to be a very different filmmaker, but it's still a very complete filmmaker.
Yeah.
Would he be able to make the same film today?
No, I don't think quite. I think the problem I don't know if I think it's a problem or not, but Quentin Tarantino is outgrowing this art form. That doesn't mean I think he's getting better than this art form, but he's outgrowing it. Quentin Tarantino now should be on Netflix with 8-part series and stuff like that, and writing books and collaborating on graphic novels and things like that. He's moved increasingly, and it starts around Kill Bill Volume 1, I'd say, that he goes into this sort of very chapter-based structure after 3 or 4 installments, if you like.
Would you see a little bit of it here?
His films a little bit. It was always there a little bit, but he literally points it out now. He's literally got chapter.
Hateful Eight
one,
is literally chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe not in that order.
You've had that ever since Kill Bill.
Yeah.
The problem is, his films are getting longer. I'm going to point to a key point where I think that tipped over into a bad thing. Because it's not about the length of a film, it's to do with what you're doing with your running time. Something very major happens to Quentin Tarantino a little bit, well, under a decade ago, that actually changed the way his films are coming out. And we'll come to that when we get to it. But he's struggling to contain everything in one cohesive story that really suits filmmaking. The reason he's still there is because he is A, in love with film, and B, that talented. I mean, you get to something like The Hateful Eight, and that got very, very mixed reviews, but I was just mesmerized by it. There's just something about this man getting people to say his dialogue and pointing cameras at them that just works. He started off his career with this sort of remixing of soundtracks of music from a certain era, very typically 60s and 70s in his first 2 or 3 films. But even later in his career, I mean, he drew that soundtrack of Ennio Morricone and things like that. So I'm endlessly fascinated by the man. And there are very few things in this world where I hit a mood and it's all about one filmmaker. And Tarantino can do that to me. I can get into like a Tarantino headspace and just watch and immerse myself in his stuff.
He's very much a genre of himself, I think. I mean, that's his thing. He can kind of make. There's only one person making Tarantino films, and that's Tarantino. Everyone else,
and it's Tony Scott.
Well, but you know what I mean. Like,
no,
anyone else could only just like, well, you're only just trying to like pretend to be Tarantino. You know, it's only one guy.
I've hated all the knockoffs, and I include people directing his stuff. Natural Born Killers was like a 2 or 3 hour whatever it was, a bum note. You know, I hear dialogue very like music in life. There's a flow to the way people talk when they're awkward or nervous or unhappy or lying or anything. And it is like, it's analogous to bum notes in music. And I'm not saying Tarantino's dialogue's that good, but only he can do his stuff. So when I watched Tony Scott do True Romance, it was like a piss take of a Tarantino film. I was the same with Natural Born Killers. The closest to getting it right was Robert Rodriguez with From Dusk Till Dawn. It's not about whether you like the end result, by the way. It's just about how it came out and how close it is to what Tarantino would have done himself. But bear in mind, Tarantino was on set.
Yeah, he was actually in the cast as well, so he's there.
Exactly, and he was going to direct it, and then it was a last minute. Actually, I'd like to concentrate on my performance because he was Richie in it, Richie Gecko. So I don't like other people doing his stuff. And we've also had, in a couple of different waves, like people trying to hitch themselves to the bandwagon. So back in the day, there were DVDs and later Blu-rays that were Quentin Tarantino Presents. And it was just putting his name on something that had nothing to do with it. The last wave of it I was aware of was Grindhouse. Grindhouse films made like a bit of a thing around the time he did Grindhouse. But before that, I mean, it wasn't so bad when it was a lot of the samurai stuff. I mean, like Lady Snowblood got like a release on the back of Kill Bill. Well, I'm all right with it because Lady Snowblood actually is really good. I've got to be careful with that because we mentioned Hard Candy on the show and like people went and bought it and stuff. Oh, but right. Lady Snowblood's really good. But the fact is, there were people hitching themselves to this wagon, and there were lots of it over the years that follow. I mean, even as late as 4 or 5 years later, Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. It's just a desperate attempt to be a Tarantino film.
I've always liked that film, though.
Funny enough, I saw that in a double bill with From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah.
Back in the day. I don't dislike that film. That's probably a bad example because I didn't dislike it at all.
I think
there was a bit like after Lock, Stock, you got Gangster Number One and lots of knockoffs of that. Tarantino has always drawn a lot of imitators, and actually, it's always imitated by people who don't get what works about it in the first place. You know.
He may have been
it's like, I mean, just the analogy would be Star Trek.
Yeah.
We covered all the Star Trek films, and we watched them try repeatedly to make the Wrath of Khan again. And the thing that they thought they had to copy was the villain with a personal and time-bound relationship to Kirk or whoever the lead was in that film. So obviously in First Contact it was the Borg Queen, and that was a link back to when he was assimilated and all the rest of it. In Nemesis it was like Shinzon, so on. And they missed the point that what worked about the Wrath of Khan was actually this treatise on aging. The Wrath of Khan is one of the most mature, quote-unquote, blockbusters I've ever seen. It's an incredibly thought-provoking piece of work for what is another one in a franchise. And I think the same is true with Tarantino. People think it's about putting on some black suits and firing some guns.
I think what makes it... to pick up on your point, why studios tend to sort of look to Wrath of Khan is because of how they can sell it in terms of like, oh, we've got a clear baddie and all those things that they know they can sell it with. Whereas if it did the mature route, that wouldn't necessarily sell the film. But I do agree with your point. What makes it great, though?
But bear in mind, if you were worried about box office, you wouldn't be covering the Wrath of Khan. I mean, that didn't do remotely as well as, say, the motion picture did.
Yeah.
It's purely about this idea of they bring in writers. They even bring in writers who love the films. This is why I've got very little respect for the John Logans of this world, because everyone venerates him as this great writer. Well, not only has he fucked up a fair amount of Bond, but he'll come in and go with this vision for Star Trek that was based on the fact he loved the Wrath of Khan, and he produced something that aped all the wrong bits. And as I say, Quentin Tarantino, when I look at mismarketed, misunderstood elements of cinema from the last 30 years, Reservoir Dogs would be so high up the list, along with possibly Skyfall in 3D, in that virtually anyone who ever opens their mouth to talk about them doesn't seem to get the appeal at all, or doesn't seem to understand what they're about. I mean, we talked about Skyfall. Everyone says about how it's about Bond being old. Has nothing to do with his age at all, that film. And we've explained that on a podcast somewhere else. 3D, constantly sold on the basis of the wow factor. There's nothing wow about 3D, otherwise we'd be walking around with fucking erections all the time. We see in 3D all the time. It's not that exciting. It's about immersion. And when I look at Tarantino, and it's more commonly people who haven't seen the films or they've only seen part of the films, Tarantino was this enfant terrible that was all like violence and fucking... Even now, he's been associated with Star Trek and everyone's like, it's going to be absurdly violent. And it's like, is that really what you think is the only string to this man's bow? I look at Reservoir Dogs and it's an exploration of trust. That's what Reservoir Dogs is. And yet it was banned as a video nasty for about 3 years. I had to see it in the cinema because I couldn't get it on video. It's fascinating to watch this man's career unfold as this violence-obsessed guy when his films are normally solidly R-rated. I wouldn't argue with that, but I wouldn't even argue it's an important part of his armory.
No, I think it's part of the flavour. It's just the guy just happens to like films with violence in. I mean, as someone who generally likes violent films, I can totally see and understand that. It's part of a reflection of the movies that he generally tends to watch and like. You know, they all tend to have violence in it, and I think it's just part of his identity. I don't see a problem with it whatsoever, and you know, I think we've kind of tamed to that sort of attitude now. Particularly Reservoir Dogs. It's kind of very tame. It's just very. There's no real on-screen violence a lot of the time. It's just... There's really not. I was only thinking tonight, actually, we may hold up. I'll expand on the point when we get into going through the film sequentially, but I actually think it's got quite a responsible attitude to violence. And it reminds me, and I was put in mind of the film Three Kings, but we'll get to it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that, Dave. But yeah, what I kind of find funny is Tarantino kind of made film studies trendy again. Kind of like the cool film student, which I kind of find is funny because Tarantino never went to film school.
It's kind of ironic, really, isn't it?
He worked in a video store.
He worked in a video shop, and then all he needed to know from that.
It's just, I'm going to be really cool and learn about films the way. Oh, I'm going to Tarantino didn't do that.
I don't think
that's the best way to do it, isn't it? Really, is just to go out there and make it.
I don't know if it is, Becca, because all I'm going to say is, Scorsese, De Palma, countless others, just the two names to the top of my list.
Spielberg, definitely.
Yeah, but they all went and studied film. So
exactly.
No one is knocking taking an academic approach.
There's nothing wrong with it.
I think all I would say is some of those slightly awkward early forays you get from certain directors wasn't there with Tarantino. I think he sprung, instead of concentrating on slowly building up the craft of it, he actually sort of almost embraced the medium as a whole.
Yeah.
And he was much more the complete article when he first made a film.
Yeah, he kind of just came out of nowhere. It's like, here I am. He's almost like a brand in itself.
It was
like,
and honestly, if you go back and watch Who's That Knocking at My Door, which is the Martin Scorsese early effort, it's actually pretty good. It's got Harvey Keitel in it, like I say. And Harvey Keitel's fucking ageless because he looks exactly the same there in about 1967 as well. And it's all right, but it looks like an early effort. Nothing wrong with that, but it looks like an early effort. And I think I can identify this as an early Tarantino by its style. But that's not born of a naivety. That's just almost born of him building a little bit on it each time. Not necessarily improving on it each time, but building on the way he engages with the medium each time.
Yeah, there was a few sort of things I saw here and there, but watching this, I feel sort of movie mistakes. Like I saw Chris Penn, not Sean Penn, tripping over the chair.
That would be a mistake. We've put the wrong brother in this show.
Oh no.
See Chris Penn tripping over the chair in the first scene. Harvey Keitel not lighting his cigarette and then continuing to. That seemed to me more of like we'll keep the scene going, and then it happens to be the best scene. We'll just keep it in just to ignore it. Like
towards the end of the film, he nearly kind of fluffs his lines as well. So it's all about keeping that kind of stuff in.
Yeah,
it keeps it natural. It's more natural, naturalistic feeling.
It's almost like, but in a way, it does feel like a first film in that regard. But then he is like kind of wise beyond his years to a degree because he's
absorbed so much material.
Well, the thing with Tarantino, he just seems like a guy who's made to make films, to write films.
Yeah, he's just born and illiterate.
To talk about film. Regardless what you think of him or whether you agree with him or not, I would gladly spend the entire day just listening to. You could talk my ear off. I will not be. He's one of those people you like.
Well, I'd like to invite him. Those mythical guests that you can invite to your dinner party.
I don't invite him
be one of them.
because I just want to. I just want to take in as much as I can because I'd be constantly asking his opinions on what do you think of that film and tell me an answer. It's about this making this film or meeting that person. All these little things.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, he's not universally. I think he's universally regarded in that. I think he's one of the more important filmmakers of our lifetime. I think he's probably the most distinctive of our lifetime, and a lot of people will bristle at that. But if you really think about it and drop your personal feelings out of it, it's true. You can spot a Tarantino film before you can spot almost anything else, with the possible exception of something like Wes Anderson. But Wes Anderson has never had the same cultural sort of penetration as a Tarantino. No. But yeah, Wes Anderson, I think, gives it a run. That you see a film that he's done and you go, well, that's Wes Anderson.
Possibly Tim Burton. Possibly.
Oh, Tim Burton. No, yeah.
Oh,
you're
yeah,
right.
Definitely.
Well, Tim Burton would definitely give that a run, actually. And he's had more commercial success as well, so that's a really good shout. But he's been a lot more prolific and a lot less consistent in a lot of ways. I don't know. I mean, you could argue about it, but certainly when I look at Tarantino, I think he's a very special filmmaker. I don't think he's a flawless filmmaker, but I think you can throw all the names up you want, and I think almost anyone you throw up is smoke and mirrors. This guy is special. And you've got to almost put your personal feelings aside and understand that.
No matter how you feel about him as a man or his work, whenever he brings out a film, you get excited. We all get excited a little bit. We all get to go, ooh, you know.
I do.
You know.
Well, yeah, definitely.
We all get like, oh, you know, because I know
it's an event, isn't it? Because he doesn't make so many films.
Well, he numbers his films as well.
Yeah,
he does. It'll be like the next one. Will
I know there's a slight misnumbering between his and how many have actually come out, but the point is, we know
like the X film from Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, it's not like Ridley Scott. We get a film a year, and it never will be. I mean,
he takes time.
He writes and directs everything. He averages 3 to 4 years.
So each one's an event.
There have been a couple of longer gaps than that. But it's like when they talk about, I mean, he's involved in Star Trek at the moment in a very sort of embryonic way. And a lot of people are like, oh, what do you think? Do you think he'll direct it? And it's like, no. I think that's pretty fucking self-evident that the guy is the author of his own work. If he's pitched something and set up a writer's room, that tells me he's not doing it. He's only ever directed his own writing. And he's only ever written, with the exception of one thing, his own ideas. So I don't think there's a hope in hell he will direct Star Trek. I think he'll be an exec producer, and that's it.
Yeah, it could be like another Casino Royale type thing, couldn't it?
No, because I think he's inside the cat pissing out this time, not the other way round. But I think it's analogous to me to George Lucas on the original Star Wars trilogy sequels, if you like, so episodes 5 and 6, where he's not the director, but he's still got a very, very strong voice in proceedings, because this is effectively his idea that they're developing.
Oh, that'd be an interesting thought.
But I cannot see him directing it, and if he were to decide to direct it, because anyone can change their mind, I'm not pronouncing he won't, because I can't know for certain. It would be a change of sort of MO, if you like. But if he decided to do it, then, he's directed TV programs in the past. He's done episodes of ER and things like that, and I think CSI. And he's fitted pretty much into the style of that show. You're not going to get a Star Trek film that feels like Pulp Fiction. If he were to do it. Credit the man with a bit more intelligence than that, and a bit less ego than that, despite the fact that he does talk up his own work, and he is clearly very self-confident. There is absolutely no way that a Quentin Tarantino directed Star Trek film would feel purely Quentin Tarantino.
And I think if we all be honest, that we'd all be interested to see that.
I'd come pants if he said he'd do it.
Yeah. But yeah, we all be like,
which would be kind of inappropriate, really, when you think it's probably not out for a couple of years, and here I am sat in January producing it. Bit of an overreaction, really.
With an awkward white stain on her. No.
What's that about? Yeah, my mum comes in late for some reason because she's got a key to this place. What's that? I was just thinking Tarantino might do Star Trek, Mum.
Yeah, so I dropped mayonnaise while eating a sandwich on my trousers. Sorry.
Why are your trousers around your ankles, Dave? It's a big sandwich and what needed to loosen my belt, Yeah. So I mean, I do wonder with Bond, because Bond is so distinctive. I do wonder if he would have effectively re-authored the style of that. But I do wonder if it would have been more of a sort of almost Elseworlds novel within that canon. He would have produced this one-off curio.
Yeah.
But he's a distinctive voice. I mean, yes, I can tell a Tarantino film, but you can't tell me Django Unchained feels like Pulp Fiction. You can't tell me Jackie Brown feels like Inglourious Bastards. You can't tell me Kill Bill feels like
anything else.
Yeah, the guy is a lot more malleable, a lot more, and a lot more, flexible than you might give him credit for.
Oh, definitely. He's, I guess if there's one thing you can say is like a lot of people kind of talk in that same very fast, slick way. You can kind of tell it's a Tarantino movie by the way that people talk.
Yeah, you can. And the thing is, when you go and watch something like Natural Born Killers, although he kept a lot of it the same, Oliver Stone rewrote some of the dialogue, and he changed some of the emphasis. And it was like listening to bum notes in music. It was just, I was just really sensitive to it, and I was just like, that line's been rewritten. And I could almost tell by the line. I was like, oh, that line's been rewritten. and it's just a particular sensitivity of mine. Now, Tarantino once or twice in his career has sounded like a parody of himself, and we'll get to those films. There's one or two where I go, well, even he's not making the dialogue work there. It's not even that it's naturalistic necessarily. Sorry, I was thinking naturalistic as hell, baby. It's not even that, because it is a heightened reality. It's not quite Kevin Smith, everyone monologuing at each other, but nor does it sound like the man in the cafe on the corner. There is something, but there's something about it. At its worst, everyone sounds like him.
Mm.
At its best, he just captures a wonderful rhythm of speech, and because he's got incredible casting instincts, people make it sing. I can't explain it any better than that.
So have we done first thoughts? Have we just talked about Tarantino?
Not on this film. We've just been talking about Tarantino. Let's talk about this film, Becca.
Yes, it is a very good film. No, it's one of those films where you just have to sit up and take notice. Really, everything that's going on, the music, the lighting, the sound, it just kind of draws you in, and it's amazing because it's one of those heist movies where you never actually see the heist, and that's fantastic in itself. No, I kind of really enjoyed this film. Sort of going to various film studies, and I'm really gutted that I didn't discover it sooner. Love Tarantino. You know, there's so much going on in this film. Every single frame has so much to unpick. Just the way his camera goes, like from the very opening scene, you've got this kind of like floating camera that kind of shows you everybody. And the fact that the narrative itself is kind of like one of those like Russian matryoshka dolls. It kind of got like flashback within a flashback, and then it hops back to what's happening now. And we kind of start off at the beginning, and then you kind of work your way backwards, as it were, a little bit. So you've got a kind of like wandering narrative that you know, has got a beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order that Tarantino has been known for. And again, as you said earlier, we see the beginning of his kind of how he structures his narratives, almost like chapters. Here, they kind of, you know, we see later on divided into like Mr. Blonde or Mr. Orange, rather than like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, like we'll see in Kill Bill, for example. Again, there's no score in this film. Sound and music features very heavily in this film's 70s music here again, which is very cool. Uses that to great effect. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this film.
Yeah, it's another thing we haven't sort of picked up. He's excellent at picking soundtracks. He just picks sort of these random things that people haven't heard.
He writes to them. He does.
He writes a lot of music as well.
He's a fan of music as much as he's a fan of film. I think he likes the marriage of pop culture songs.
Just with that as well, he's an analog man in a digital age.
Oh, certainly.
He's quite an old soul. For all the gleeful enthusiasm the man's got,
he's very much a child of the 70s.
He's very much celluloid and vinyl.
Certainly, I think that's what has so much appeal about him. Because he's still got, you know, even though like a lot of my music now is digital, you still have to, you know, something to hold on to, something that's tangible, and that you can touch. What was I going to say?
Yourself?
I was going to say something. Oh yes, no, that was it. I'm looking forward to when we discuss Kill Bill, specifically Volume 1. I was all over that film when it came out, and I loved the soundtrack. I got it somewhere, I must dig it out. But you know, I just remember watching.
Which one?
Volume 1.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, the first one. Sorry. I remember when this came out, I was watching interviews with Tarantino, and he was like, "We've got the RZA on this, you know, soundtrack," and he was just like so excited.
Well, the way he came across the 5, 6, 7, 8 song was
exactly.
Of a story as well. We'll save that for another week. But that was just complete happenstance as well. The way he ended up with that song in it.
It's amazing. But he's talking about like, you know, the people he's managed to get in that film. But anyway, that's another podcast for another day.
What I can't even. What's the word? Malgueras Salirosa from Part 2. That's Robert Rodriguez. Just wrote for him as a favourite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's incredible, but yeah, just the way he uses music is intriguing in itself, and something that has to be picked apart.
But we're going to watch a filmmaker here who is if he'd never changed from this and had knocked out 8 films, you'd have 8 great films. And I'm sure there's people out there who prefer he'd stayed like this because maybe they think his films are too long now or whatever. But we will see growth, and I think that's one of the things that appeals to us about like focusing on a director, which we haven't really done so far. That we're going to see growth and change as a man ages over the course of getting on for 30 years. So it's going to be fascinating. As for Reservoir Dogs, for my opening thoughts, it was my favourite Tarantino film for a long time. It isn't any longer. It's just been overtaken by things that have come out since, but also things that were already out at the time. It's just a reappraisal over time. It's not the greatest transfer, the film. It's clean, but it's kind of a bit washed out. Pulp Fiction is suddenly like somebody's opened the curtains next week. That's a much, much brighter film. But
this one was very much black and white. Well, not black and white, literally black and white, but there isn't much colour apart from black and white and red.
No, I suppose that's
colour
true.
palette.
I suppose this colour palette is limited anyway, in a way that maybe Pulp Fiction's isn't. What it lacks that, say, a Pulp Fiction has, and certainly a Jackie Brown has, is a certain humour. It's not that funny. A few lines are. Some of the lines that are funny are actually stolen from elsewhere, but we'll come to them in a minute, because a couple of them are fairly early in the film. What I love about it as well is you don't learn anything about Tarantino, but you learn everything about Tarantino, in that you could watch his filmography, and I think you'd know he had a foot fetish. I think that becomes out pretty obviously across the series.
It's pretty obvious in Dusk Till Dawn, really. It's like, all right, myself a scene.
Kill Bill 1 from Dusk Till Dawn. Yeah, he's got a bit. Pulp Fiction, she's walking around without her shoes on.
Yeah.
But if you're going to fetishize over a set of feet, why Uma Thurman, who's a size 10? But anyway, size 10 UK.
Maybe he likes big feet.
He likes big feet.
And he cannot lie.
And you would know about his comic
You can't deny.
But you wouldn't necessarily. He doesn't reveal a lot about himself personally, but all of his interests and thoughts, and a lot of his ideas as well, are strewn across his films. There are things in this film that characters say that I know was like Tarantino's own personal views on things, and we'll get to them. Had this man never changed an iota from this, he sprung fully formed as an exceptional filmmaker. What he's produced here, I think, has been bettered, but as it's wonderful, it reminds me of the Wrath of Khan in a lot of ways. In the way that was a treatise on aging, this is a treatise on trust and how these things get tested by tension and pressure. And really, what it is an hour at a warehouse, augmented with cutaways as to how they got there. That's all this film is, deceptively simple, and I love it a great deal.
Yeah,
Chris?
It's just pure character work to me, and I really like it for it. When I first watched it, I watched it in that kind of period where it wasn't quite... I really loved watching films, but I wasn't quite the astute film watcher. So I was just kind of like, oh, Reservoir Dogs, that'll have some violence in. And I watched it, I was kind of disappointed with it, really. But that was just before I really kind of got into
It's like 3D. If you go to 3D expecting wow, you'll be disappointed. And if you come to this expecting ultra violence, you'll be disappointed.
I think I was just at the wrong age. I wasn't quite mature enough to really appreciate it. But, by the time I watched Pulp Fiction, by the time it was on TV, I was like, this is just so watchable. This is like just is great. I love it. And then you come back to Reservoir Dogs, and you can kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it now. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I think this is very clearly, to me, a very independent first feature, but it's a first feature from, as we've established, a master filmmaker. There are some things that are rough around the edges, but you can just... Maybe it might be because I know the kind of majority of the story around the film, but you can just tell how he is... He's been working with screenwriting and with it, trying to get a film made for a few years previous to this. So I think he's kind of matured when he came to making his first film. So by the time he's made his first film, he kind of landed with a bang.
Yeah. What was that first film he made? Because he made another film that never got released, and he said that after 3 years or whatever it was of
I don't think it's even finished.
He said he looked at it and he hadn't made what he thought he'd made. I always found that quite an interesting way to explain it. He didn't go, it was shit or whatever. He actually said, I hadn't made what I thought I'd made. That what you think you're shooting in your head and what you're actually shooting can be two different things.
I think that happens quite a lot to many filmmakers, I think. Sometimes, which is why sometimes they maybe don't try and keep to that. They just try and think, well, I'll find the film in the editing suite, and sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. But I think Tarantino even said that about Pulp Fiction. I was watching a documentary just now, and someone said, like, Tarantino said, like, I'm not sure. It's kind of came out different. And he watched it. It's like Pulp Fiction. It's like, fucking hell. Yeah, I think this is a very solid debut. It's, I think it's very pop culture heavy, but I think it kind of was the beginning that changed cinema. Now I think it was kind of came at a time where we were wanting something different. We wanted something new, and here it came. It was like parts of the 90s.
It couldn't have been better timed. I mean, it came out around the time I turned 16. By the time I got to see it, I was nearly 18. Because it kept getting re-released because we couldn't get the home video release, which is pure politics. The BBFC don't do that anymore, or at least I'm not aware that they do.
No,
someone may correct me, but it was much more being seen to ban it. It was it was the equivalent of keeping Myra Hindley in prison, which I'm not saying she shouldn't have been, but that political cause célèbre when so many similar things are getting different treatment. That's all I mean.
Yeah, it was the idea that like violence or stuff in film could corrupt.
It's not even that, Chris. When you come back to it, Reservoir Dogs isn't actually that violent a film.
Yeah.
It really, genuinely is not. And so it was almost being treated according to people's perceptions of it, rather than... It's a bit like the BBC will release something and it will get 40 complaints, and then the newspaper will make some vague allusion to it, and suddenly it's got 20,000 complaints. And the vast majority of those 20,000 never actually saw it. Reservoir Dogs is a little bit like that. That most of the people considering it this horrendous, ultra-violent, violent festival of sort of fucking torture porn of something, haven't seen it because it's just not what it is. It's men stood around talking.
It is.
Much more than anything else.
I mean, so, should we say the infamous part is probably the ear cutting scene, which we don't actually see. The fact
at the point of when he's actually doing that as well, the camera moves away from the action and then comes back.
Yeah,
to find the ear been severed. So
it is still grim. I mean, it's still like, oh god, that's just really good. But at no point does it feel. Do you feel like
it's not gratuitous, is it?
No, you don't. You don't feel like anyone's or like even Tarantino's getting off on it. It's like every sort of every wound, every sort of bullet shot, every bit of violence is kind of like felt, and it's not necessarily like, oh, this is I mentioned
the film Three Kings earlier. The film Three Kings, which I only ever saw once. I saw it at the cinema, like Christ, 18 years ago nearly, and I've never seen it since.
Yeah, it's old film now.
But it stuck with me. It's a David O. Russell film, and even though I've seen it once, I'd recommend it. I think it's worth seeing. It's a George Clooney film. Now, he explains at one point with almost like a visual to accompany it what happens when you're shot. What happens to the wound where the bullet goes in and how it gets affected and all that. And I can't help but think of that when we see Miss Lawrence shot very early in the film, because normally in Hollywood films they're either dead instantly or they can still run around like Olympic sprinters even though when they've been shot 6 times or whatever. This man is now disabled and possibly on the way to death, and we don't know. And sort of White is half telling him something that is meant to reassure him, but could sort of been true, in that he could live for quite a long time like that, but we don't know. And he's slowly bleeding out, and he's in agony. And Tim Roth, I mean, Tim Roth's accent's awful in this, but his performance other than that's pretty good. When he's in the car and kicking his legs around, that's a pure pain response. It's like when it's like when someone cuts us and we arch our back and things like that. All the things nurses are trained to look for. It's quite responsible in its attitude to violence, I think, but that might be a minority view.
It's quite accurate as well, isn't it? Because he had sort of a medical trained professional on set, just kind of make sure that everything was pretty much true to life.
He must have paid. I just know. The other thing is Tarantino started this off funding this. I mean, we could talk about the making of it in a bit, but some of the funding he got from a guest slot on the Golden Girls playing an Elvis impersonator.
Really?
There you go. There's a story. How to get your
There's a fun fact for you.
Appear on the
basically, it wasn't until you got Harvey Keitel on board, and that really brought the funding up to an acceptable level.
Well, what it was is he had it part funded. And
he sold the script for True Romance, didn't he?
Yeah. He had it part funded, and the guy who was going to direct with him is a guy called Lawrence Bender, who I always tend to get confused with Lawrence Tierney, two different people and two very different temperaments and ages. Lawrence Bender was taking acting classes at the time, and I'm going to get this wrong because it's a bit convoluted, but it's something like the acting teacher's husband was friends with Harvey Keitel's wife, or something like that. It was that sort of relationship. And Lawrence Bender had that script. The teacher saw it, liked it, and ended up on the sly slipping it to Harvey Keitel, who loved it, asked to be in it, and said he would help to get it funded. Now, one of the things he really helped with was they were casting in a very small pool of LA actors, and Harvey Keitel said, you need to go to New York for the best guys. And he paid for them all to go to New York and have casting sessions there. That's what he funded, by and large. But also he brought a cachet with it as well, that we've got Harvey Keitel on board.
Yeah, it gets a bit of name credits, like gets things moving, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is a $1.5 million film. This should be way out of the range of getting a Harvey Keitel on board.
Mm. So, so I think it also gets heads turning as well. Like once you have so what's this new independent film starring Harvey Keitel? Oh, okay. Let's have a look at this. It gets a little bit of interest then, doesn't it? So,
although Harvey Keitel has done other independents, things like Smoke and so on. But what else to talk about with the making of this? And it was filmed in a heat wave. The sort of building they're in for the vast majority of the film is actually a converted mortuary, and the building you see used as Tim Roth's apartment is over the top of it. Actually, in reality. Yeah, we can talk about the rest of it as we go through.
Yeah, I did think that looked like a huge apartment for one guy.
Yeah, for one dude.
Yeah,
in LA as well, and all the expensive sort of costs are on the coasts over there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They really are. And plus, I mean, it kind of all the cast used their own suits and own clothes, and I think that the costume designer kind of made those colours, the suits like for free. Just because she was so in love with the crime genre, but otherwise all the other costumes and things like that belong to the actors. So try and save a few quid.
Yeah, this is a low budget film. Read a lot on it today, but as I say, we'll talk about it as we go through. Shall we discuss this film sequentially, folks?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's go to work.
I only want to say a couple of things about this opening scene, and then I'll kind of let you guys talk about it, actually. Just talk about things I've seen before. There's a point where Harvey Keitel says to Blonde, I think. So White says to Blonde something like, if you shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologise.
Yeah.
They've got that line from Muhammad Ali. Around the time Muhammad Ali was fighting Jimmy Ellis, I've seen the footage of it. Muhammad Ali delivers it much better as well. Muhammad Ali,
he always does.
He stood in the ring. He's walking around the sort of apron of the ring at the end of a sort of public sparring session, and he's just chatting with the press. It isn't even a formal Q&A. He's just like, there's just a bit of banter going back and forth, and he says, and you can tell Ali can't quite hear what's being said to him because it's a throng of a sort of crowd, and he says what, and he says what, and you hear the reporter say, Jimmy Ellis said he dreamt he beat you, and he just goes, "Oh, if he dreamt he beat me, you better wake up and apologise." But it was delivered by Muhammad Ali. The second point I want to make about this, or there's three actually. The second point is the thing about tipping, where he says, "I don't tip." That Tarantino claims that as something that was his opinion in early years. He said because he worked at a video store. He said so he was in a minimum wage job that no one deemed tip worthy.
No.
So that was his argument. The third point I want to make is the Madonna bit, which is where this whole sequence starts. Now, Tarantino's character, Mr. Brown, comes up with this theory that, like a virgin, the Madonna song is about a woman who's had a ton of men, dick, as he described it.
How many dicks is that? A lot.
A lot, yeah. Meeting a fantastically well-endowed man, and it hurts her for the first time since virginity. Apparently, Tarantino went and asked Madonna if he was right. That was his real opinion.
It's so clear that that's what he generally thinks. I'm going to put that in a film.
That is just him riffing on that subject.
The correct answer is actually what Blonde said. Blonde says, no, she's been screwed around. treated badly, and she finds love. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
And he had a copy
That's
of
what Madonna said. She wrote back to him, got it signed, and was like, "No, it's about love."
Yeah, I'm
Lots
just
of love, Madonna, kiss, kiss.
He had a copy of... Yeah, that's just completely blown me off.
And not in a good way, Dave.
No, seriously, where was I? That was... You know what that was like? That was like... You know when Alan Partridge is talking everyone through The Spy Who Loved Me, and Michael suddenly goes, at the last minute, right? And a parachute comes out.
Stop getting Bond wrong.
Michael! Right. Okay. But he had a copy of Erotica, and Madonna signed it with "It's about love. It's about love, not no Quentin. It's about love, not dick." So, but that was his real theory, and he went to Madonna with it. What do you guys make of this scene?
Yeah, I generally think it's. I'm watching it. It's clearly like it's kind of funny how the opening, well, the first thing you actually hear is Quentin Tarantino doing a pop culture reference that kind of set the benchmark for Tarantino's work. Yeah, I mean, the Madonna thing is clearly Tarantino's opinion at that time, at least. I assume he's changed his opinion now. Madonna's corrected him.
He was a 27, 28-year-old man when writing it. Yeah.
I like the idea of just like the idea of. It's kind of difficult because this film came at a time or when I was at a certain age where I wouldn't be that aware, but in terms of gangster films, having gangsters sit around in a cafe talking about just general shit, rather than like, oh yeah, right, we're gonna sort of general gangster sort of like crime stuff or being all sort of stereotype. They're actually talking about regular stuff before they actually before they do a job. It was literally like, oh, that's like, that Madonna song, and like, yeah, I don't believe in tipping, all this kind of stuff. I think that's really kind of cool and kind of funny in its own way. It's also Tarantino, the way he writes dialogue just makes it just sing, as you say, Dave. And what I kind of really like about the tipping bit, even though now it feels so cliche now, it's just so well known, it almost feels like a famous bit almost that a comedian does. It does bring, I do find myself going, yeah, but, Mr. Pink does have a point. I don't agree with him,
Mr.
but
Pink has a point.
He does have a point.
Mr. Pink has a defensible point in almost everything he says in the entire film.
Yeah,
pretty much.
You don't always agree. I mean, I don't.
He's like the brains of the outfit.
Well, he's not.
No, he's wrong, but he has an argument every single time.
No, definitely.
Yeah,
he's always wrong.
You think later on, when everyone is like losing their shit, he's not necessarily the calmest because a lot of what he's saying is coming out of fear.
No, but he's trying to get it
But
together.
he's actually the most rational most of the time.
He's actively thinking.
Yes.
For sure.
That's the thing. He's always actively thinking. So it's like the way like Mr. White sort of says, "I don't trust Mr. Blonde." He's like saying, "Well, I know he's not. Well, regardless of that, he might be a psycho. I know he isn't the rat because clearly he can't be." So. Yeah, I do like the scene. It's quite entertaining. The only thing I picked up on it was Chris Penn tripping up the tables. They walked off. That's about it.
I've never noticed it, and I've seen this film a double-digit number of times, I'd say.
Yeah, he sort of
never noticed that.
It's like he trips over the chair.
Is that when they're leaving?
Yeah, just as leave. Yeah.
Oh, and it's fading out, so I'm probably not even looking. I'm probably glancing around, waiting for the music to kick in.
Yeah, it is literally like that. But it's I've only literally saw it like today on this viewing.
It's funny, they do seed some things, because they're talking about a piece of music at one point as well, where they were like, I didn't realise the thing she was singing about in the song was this. We hear that song, whichever it was, in his apartment later. And they also do talk about K-Billy super sounds of the 70s.
Some of the stuff just feels like very like some lines of dialogue Mr. Blonde doesn't feel like his character he has later on. He feels very much like a calm individual.
Yeah.
Like some of the stuff just feels like, just give Mr. Blue something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Blue. I mean, Mr. Brown, if it wasn't Quentin Tarantino, would be there for much the same reason. But certainly, Blue is there to like bulk numbers out.
Yeah.
Played by Eddie Bunker. Eddie Bunker was a career criminal until about his early 40s, somewhere in the mid 70s, and then he came out and became like a writer and actor. He wrote. Did he write Runaway Train? I think he may have done. Yeah. So it's almost like a talisman for the film more than a character.
Yeah, more like it. Okay, he does actually look like a criminal and things like that. So.
Yes.
Yeah, he does.
Convincingly, because he
is. Yeah. God rest his soul. So
yeah. I mean, he had like his first child or something like the year after this film.
Yeah.
Yeah. He made a life for himself late in life.
Oh, well, good for him.
Yeah, well
congratulations on.
Let's patronise Eddie Bunker.
hey.
Good job, little buddy.
And then then we get to the should we say the iconic opening shot, which now watching now it just feels very much film student, like mimicking Tarantino, even though this is completely
Tarantino.
new this now.
I know, that was just a nice little cool shot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the choice of music is perfect. Little Green Bag, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's what's not wrong with this film, but it is kind of much to the point now where it is so famous, it is so iconic, just because it has been parodied by everybody.
Yeah, I mean, they parodied that in Coupling. They went off to like a wedding or something, and then they slowly walked down the road.
Exactly.
Like,
well, yeah,
gently and slowly exhaling cigarettes, and suddenly the
And
women are like, "Will you stop doing
you know,
your Reservoir Dogs bit?"
Yeah, literally. Certainly, we see Return Jack brought to our screens, which I'm very excited about. But no, I think any kind of like popular culture, like Family Guy, Simpsons, other kind of films and TVs, they have to literally.
Or as we like to call both of them, stuff Becca watches.
Well, it's kind of things that generally, have provided a point of sort of a touchstone, because it's not me that watches them; other people watch them too.
But it is still you that watches them.
Well, yeah, but there's myself and others, so it's not not just confined to me, unfortunately. I know you tried to pigeonhole and say the stuff I don't watch, but it's just the stuff that I like. But it's basically things that have kind of been within the popular, it's become part of the popular narrative, certainly within filmmaking as well. Like especially in the mid to late 90s, for sure.
Please write to us via AOL.
Back in the 90s,
that's about as up to date as The Simpsons.
But no, it's basically kind of just everything that sort of came out in that sort of mid to late 90s just literally had to include like the token Tarantino thing.
But it's better at 2 decades removed than it was at 5 years removed, because at 5 years removed, this was being done to death.
And now you can look back at it.
And by the time you get to 2000, you still had like a few remnants of this, and then you had all that fucking Guy Ritchie Mockney fucking bollocks as well.
And that's it. Well, it wasn't copying Guy Ritchie; it was copying Kill Bill, and that was about annoying as it got. But yeah, I think that's exactly my point. It's now several years removed, and it's kind of gone back around. It seems a lot better, but I still think it's really iconic. The music is cool. If you want to do like a gangster scene, you have to include either Steve's Wheel or Little Green Bag. And it's just one of those really iconic soundtracks, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's better coming. I think the next 2 weeks have better soundtracks than this.
Sure.
What a confident debut!
Definitely Kill Bill Part 1.
Before we move on, there's one thing I did pick up on this viewing. It's only just a minor little tidbit, but the actual rat of the group is the one that actually rats out Mr. Pink about not tipping. He's like, who hasn't tipped?
He does.
Yeah.
I only noticed that today because Joe comes back from the bathroom.
Yeah.
And says, "Who hasn't kicked in a book?" And he just says, "Mr. Pink."
Yeah. That's the sort of thing. Oh, okay, that's probably a coincidence or tidbit, really. I thought, okay, that's probably a character thing or character nuance. Because there's certain little things about Mr. Orange that kind of stuck out, because he's the only Brit in the cast. So the thing about him having like a dodgier accent or put-on accent, or something about him that just stands out.
Trying to fit in, yeah.
And it could be down to the fact that he just doesn't look one of them. And I think it's largely down to the fact that I think he looks younger than everyone else. So it plays in the part that he's just trying to fit in. He's the new kid. He wants to kind of like.
Although I would have thought Chris Penn would have been the youngest at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. But I in terms of the actual group, because Chris Penn is by family,
yeah,
and he's not really like a member of the gang.
He's the Miss Moneypenny of proceedings.
He really is.
Yeah, it doesn't look quite as good as a dress, but rocks a shell suit really well.
Yeah, that shell
He
suit and
didn't have a
ancient
suit.
foam. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I just thought I'd point that out because I just suddenly remembered. And I was like, shit, yeah, that's a little thing I've noticed. But anyway, so we get
We come out of the credits. We come out of that sequence to him screaming. He's been shot in the gut, and he's lying. In the back of his
I don't know
car.
whether to mention it now or whether to mention it at the end as a spoiler alert. Because they're in this film
could
is
we
many years old.
Spoiler alert, we're going to talk through the film anyway.
Well, the credits are in orange, and he turns out to be the rat.
That's not a
There we are.
spoiler. That's a font choice.
It's kind of a spoiler.
Yeah. No, it's not. It really isn't.
Well, no, it's not really a spoiler. It's like a clue, a hint. I think it's more than a font choice. I think you can read things into it. The fact that
No,
he
you
is the
can't,
rat.
Becca. Honest.
Well, I did it for my AS film studies, and that's where I got full marks. So
Doesn't make it right though. Just
No, but I
coming
just
up
think
with
it's
some theories don't make it
no,
right.
it's just one of those things. I think it's one of those things where like you can read too much into it. But I think Tarantino is definitely one of those filmmakers that he kind of
Hey,
you
and
know-
they all kicked in a buck, and 4 films later, there was Buck who was there to fuck. Coincidence? I think not.
I'm
That's just
just
silly.
I'm just going to see 5 years down the line, and there's times he's going to be interviewed somewhere, and he's just going to say, "Oh yeah, the font choice was totally meant to be there to episode 8." Sorry, and Beck's going to be like, "See, I told you."
Well,
A plus in film studies, motherfuckers.
I just think it's funny. That's all.
What made you decide to make orange the film?
Well, I just fancied the colour, you know.
I did AS level study
1972. Well,
when I was 9.
no, well, it's a nice bright colour and it makes it stand out. I think it's interesting that it kind of picks that style.
It's very 70s. That's why I thought.
It
Generally,
is exactly. It is very 70s. Definitely, it is in that kind of like 70s style font as well. And it's very eye catching and it's quite lurid also as well.
We've gone to the credits and they'd look like turds floating up the screen. We could have gone, oh no, the guy at Tarantino's the rat.
That's because he says in the film, But...
Yeah, that's a bit too close to Mr. Shit. Yeah,
so
they seem to have deliberately chosen a very light interior on the car he's bleeding out in. So that's kind of distressing.
Yeah, you actually see all the blood everywhere, really, don't you? He's like, I think it's more in his performance. He's literally going like, he's screaming, he's panicking, he's making sounds that
he can't contain his pain. Yeah. You do see it when people are in pain. They'll kick their legs or arch their back, and he's doing the lot.
Yeah,
it's really good. And what does he say his first name? White's first name is Larry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lots of drop references to future Tarantino films to come.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he works with Alabama.
Vega.
She must have been gutted when she was dumped with Christian fucking Slater after that. And then you work with a Hollywood legend or Christian Slater.
Christian Slater.
Vic Vega, Mr. Blonde, is the brother of Vincent Vega, John Travolta's character in Pulp Fiction.
Glad that they didn't get a chance to make that film together.
There is also, doesn't bother me because I think Michael Madson is uniquely lacking in any fucking talent whatsoever except chain smoking.
That's because he was in Die Another Day. Oh.
It's nothing to do with that. I just think he's crap. He's one of these characters that suited this role, but that was about it.
That's all, yeah.
Probably Kill Bill. He's actually off-puttingly bad in that.
So, to be fair, I haven't seen him in much at all, and I do wonder whether he's one of these guys who had potential but has just squandered it, and so somehow only Tarantino has actually managed to get out of him.
Yeah, the only films I've seen him in, apart from Die Another Day, were Tarantino movies. So
I've seen him. Wasn't he in Free Willy?
Yes.
Or Complimentary Penis, as we call it over here.
Yeah, I am seen through Free Willy. Maybe I'm looking all places.
Oh, you and your Americanisms, Chris. Complimentary Penis is a wonderful series of films for kids.
Well, I was known as Release Bill, but there you are.
Okay, really.
You crushed our boy. Oh, what a mess.
Hey, you've crossed my boys. Get off me. Yeah. So, I just think he kind of whispers and chain smokes and everything, and that's about it. He's okay, but beyond this role, I'm never that happy to see him. So the idea that there would have been like a film that would have been like 40% him, like the Vega brothers, I'm kind of happy enough that didn't happen.
I'm sure Tarantino would have worked, but I think it's one of those ideas that it's based on something that I was just kind of throwing, because Tarantino likes to kind of combine his universes, like in a way, in a more passing way. It's just something like kind of it's kind of more like a fun thing. So I think when it came to this, like he was writing True Romance at the same time, so it's kind of thing he thought it was kind of fun, and then later on he kind of, I'll reuse the same surname, and like maybe it is his brother. Who knows? Maybe they're related, and kind of leave it open for people to kind of go.
He does reference Marcellus here as well. We do believe that is Marcellus Wallace from Pulp Fiction. So his universes are connected, and he has confirmed that there's effectively his movie universe and then his movie universe. And I'll explain that when we get to Kill Bill. But yeah. Well, I'll give you the outline of it now. He's got his movie universe, which is all the characters we know, and they are related. And they are related to a couple of other universes as well, like Broomhilda from Django Unchained is the grandmother of Shaft. But you've also got the movies the people in that universe would watch, and that includes Pulp Fiction. Not Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill.
So Kill Bill's a movie.
It's a movie in the Quentin Tarantino's movie universe.
Tarantini.
Who's that?
Tarantini. It's a collaboration between Quentin Tarantino and Fruitini.
Is it Tarantino for kids?
Yeah.
T-E-N-Y.
The man from Tarantini. He said yes. Okay. We've lost the fucking plot here. What were we up to?
Tim Roth screaming.
And Larry's going, "You're going to be okay." And they get to the hideout, which is kind of, as I say, it's a converted mortuary for the purposes of this film.
Yeah, it just looks like an emptied old warehouse. I mean, at times I thought it might have been like a meat packing place or something. I don't know, something like that.
It's got an abattoir feel to it, hasn't it?
Obviously, it's got big ramps and some place where we had big machinery. But yeah, they get there. Orange is trying to convince him to look, just drop me off hospital. I won't rat. Like I just need medical help. I'm gonna die otherwise. And he's
trying to get him to just drop him at a hospital anyway. Now, obviously, only he knows at this point he's a cop. So bizarrely, in being able to use the fact he's undercover to get out of a dangerous situation, he's actually convincing White that he's brave, because he said, Christ, he's willing to get himself put away without implicating us in anything. What I really like about this, because it seems such a simple film, and it is, but the timings are exquisite. We get a certain amount of time of White and Orange, and setting them into that environment where most of the film is going to take place, and just bang on where it feels sensible to introduce somebody else. Pink walks in, and then we get a certain amount of Pink, and just as time comes to broaden it out again, we realise Blonde is stood there. The film is exquisitely paced.
Yeah, I mean, you get what you find with that. You kind of get like what's happened through their dialogue. So you get to talk through like kind of like what's it. You get like a little bit into what Blonde has done, or how they've seen it Blonde has done, and then you get like a flashback with a little bit of intro of like how Mr. White got involved with everything.
Yeah, we don't at the start of the film, when we know it's gone wrong, we don't know what. We know it was a heist. We don't know what of or what they were all doing. Through the course of the film, it's revealed to us that it's a diamond wholesalers, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a diamond wholesaler, so that implies not retail, but it does come off as a store, but we'll see. And they're all doing different things, including when Blonde is on like crowd control, which is one of the reasons it all goes wrong. Because all he's supposed to do is keep people calm, but somebody obviously hits an alarm and he starts shooting the place up. We know that Pink basically runs for it and just grabs a car.
Yeah.
And we know that White and Orange get out and manage to get a woman out of the car who, in pure reflex, she shoots Orange, and Orange shoots her in pure response. And the look on Tim Roth's face is incredible.
Well, that happens actually late on in the film. That's like,
I know it does. Yeah. I'm just trying to paint where we are.
Yeah.
We actually get background on White first, don't we? At Joe and nice guy Eddie's, who we think is Joe's son or nephew, one of the two, is at his office, and he's just talking about jobs he's been doing with this lady Alabama, who is, I presume, Alabama from True Romance.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get him
Heck
involved.
of a thief.
Sorry?
Heck of a thief, as he says.
Heck of a thief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get a sense that they're kind of old friends, they've worked before and all that kind of thing. So,
And he's quite protective towards her as well. So
Yeah.
unlike Christian Slater, he's more of a sort of uncle figure to her, father figure, that sort of thing.
yeah. But I think it's also a sense that he's a kind of guy who does build attachment, so...
Yes. It's the sort of thing that of all the characters in this film, I do take most of them for what they are, and that makes this film quite a clinical exercise in some respects, in that I don't care about them beyond the film much, but White of all of them is the character I'd like to know more about. And I think that's because I think you've just put it into words and I've never really thought about it before, that I think perhaps there are stories of him forming attachments in perhaps a way most people in those types of jobs don't. But the conversation between Pink and White is purely about trust. It's purely about piecing together how long it took the police to get there, who was doing what went wrong, if anyone's followed them, what's happened to Orange, and then it gets a bit prickly because Pink is showing. White's kind of sentimental, isn't he? And Pink, possibly because he has just seen someone just shot right next to him, but Pink is being very businesslike. Pink is being very, we need to do this, and if he dies, he dies sort of attitude. And it does end up with them having a fight.
Yeah. White punches him and then kicks him and they pull patrol guns. And it's that kind of like director author shit where you actually... It's just two guys basically pointing guns at each other, but it's
a Tarantino shot.
It's iconic. Like, if you show you a still of it, that is... I mean, I saw stills of that before I even know what it was. It was like, I was reading like...
And the camera pulls back very gently to reveal... The camera work in this is really fluid. It's quite unflashy, but it's very, very fluid. The camera tends to keep moving, but it's really, really unobtrusive.
Yeah. I think it does that to kind of add momentum to something that's actually quite still. You know what I mean? It's like as Becca was saying in the diner scene, when the camera's like moving between it, but it's kind of it gives it more momentum as like you are basically just a few guys sat at a table talking.
White guys talking.
It adds momentum. It builds up like kind of like it rather than just sort of like a few shots of like cut to this face, cut to that face, cut to that shot. It adds a bit more. It makes it more easy to watch and engage with.
So we get the reveal of Blonde. Blonde is basically stood drinking what looks like, doesn't necessarily mean it is McDonald's or something, but he's gone to like a drive-through and grabbed a drink, which is another thing about how these guys
and eating because you just
he's basically grabbed fast food on the way from a house.
Calm as fuck, and as we already established, he's killed a few people already.
That's why he's crazy.
So just like to give him, this guy's fucking insane.
Then we cut to his background, and his background is, and this is key for the end of the film, he has done prison time for Joe and Eddie. He's basically gone away when all he had to do to cut a deal was say their names, and he didn't. So they're now looking after him. We see him again in the same office we saw White, and they're just trying to get him work, to get him up from under the yoke of quite a nasty prison officer, or a parole officer rather. He, of all of them, has real chemistry.
Well, they say nasty. You mean competent?
Bastard does his job, Chris. Yeah,
but making sure criminals don't do any criminal activity.
If you want to carry, they haven't thought it through because, like, what if you want to carry on committing crimes? That's not useful, is it? Right? He's got. It's one.
What an arsehole!
I know. This is one of the few bits of the film I find irritating. The sort of fucking like roughhousing between him and nice guy Eddie is really fucking irritating.
What you mean the homophobic kind of? Well, not homophobic, but kind of like
it's not. It's not even that. I don't know what it is actually. It's not the fact that they're doing loads of bumming each other jokes. That's quite fun.
out of like tone. It's not the right. It doesn't fit the rest of the film. It's a bit weird. It kind of establishes sort of like character, but it doesn't really follow through. No, excuse the pun. But it's just
you
like
want to follow through in that scenario when someone's trying to bum you.
No, you don't want to do that. But it just adds a bit of humour, I guess. But it just seems to me out of place with the rest of the film.
I didn't like it. To be honest, the whole film was all kind of set around secret identity. So basically, they don't talk about any of their personal shit. So imagine they don't even talk about their actual relationship with the boss.
Hang on. They could, because he's the one that they use names to. When he turns up, it's Vic Vega. He's done prison time for them. They can talk about whatever they want in that office. Those three.
In terms of everyone else, not in that scene. I mean, talk about outside.
Everyone else cannot.
Yeah, so
because White breaks the rules basically.
So no one really the idea is no one's really supposed to know like who they are, other than like you're Mr. White and that's it. So anything else outside of that in terms of who they are personally. So here it's like, you get to actually see them be themselves. Like obviously that he has a really close relationship with Nice Guy Eddie. They're almost like pals, so they are acting like kids, like dicking around. There's a kind of like they almost have like a competition between like who's the favourite between him and the boss. There's like it is that kind of childish kind of like, oh, I'll fight for it, but I love you like a brother, almost like kind of thing. So I'm fine with it. It just kind of, to me, just adds more to their character, to their history.
Okay, we come out of that to right. So we get his backstory, which is,
and I'm sure Nice Guy Eddie got his backstory. Sorry,
but he's extraordinarily loyal.
Yeah.
So that does play in at the end of the film, because they tried to sort of play it off on him as a nutcase, and Joe and Eddie are like, no, this is the one guy we would trust. So we cut back to Orange, White, and Blonde. So at the time we get Marvin out of the car.
Oh, the cop.
Marvin Nash, the cop, yeah.
Yeah.
Leading to the most infamous bit of the film. On the way back, not only is he bought drive-through, he's kidnapped a police officer, put him tied up in the boot of the car. They bring him inside, beat the shit out of him, and then tie him to a chair.
Don't these all just sound lovely?
This is the one bit I didn't get tonight, because I think it was the one time, because I was pretty mesmerised by this film. There's one bit where I just wasn't concentrating, and it was like, I'll ask later, because I can't remember. What do Pink and White go off to do to leave Blonde alone with Marvin?
Well, the idea is, because Nice Guy Eddie comes and visits, she comes
in. Is it to go and change cars over or something?
Basically, so he points out, look, right, you've stashed the diamonds, we've got a load of cars, so let's take the car, I'll take them to the location, we'll pick up the diamonds, we'll relocate back here. It's basically sort of like, let's move the cars, let's get the diamonds, let's like...
I mean, it's an excuse to leave Blonde alone, but I just couldn't even remember what the cover story was.
Yeah. That was the reason why that's like they were going to like basically like make sort of remove the cars to like relieve suspicion, to make sure like that it does still look like an abandoned area, and then pick up the diamonds as well.
Right. Okay.
And then so we have that scene which is infamous, should we say?
Yeah. Is this before we get Orange's backstory?
No, Orange's backstory is after he shoots him.
It's in the middle of this somewhere, isn't it?
No, he shoots him first, doesn't he? Then he sort of like...
Then we get his backstory, right?
Because it is the longest... It is the longest backstory as well, obviously.
It is. We'll get onto that in a minute. So he ties him to a chair, puts on K. Billy Supersounds of the 70s, which is just starting the Steelers Wheel song, Stuck in the Middle with You. Mm. Steelers Wheel being the Jerry Rafferty band, same guy who did Baker Street. This is possibly his first iconic piece of cinema.
Yeah, the one thing that's kind of get referenced a lot of times. It's also like the fact that it had an ear slicing off moment. But it's when you watch it, it's so brutal. Like
but everything about the thing that's brutal about it when I watch it is, firstly, they give him quite a hard hitting beating, but secondly, the way he's throwing petrol at him and laughing.
Yeah,
that's way harder than the ear cutting bit.
It's the kind of how casual he is. He's just like, I'm just standing there.
I don't give a shit what you know, but I'll torture you.
Yeah, and and it's just like he's there dancing with the switch with the razor, and then he just stands there, looks at him as if saying, "Where should I cut?" And also, even that alone just builds anticipation, just dread. Yeah. And then he does it, and then he just slices his ear off, and it's just like they're mocking him, like sort of, "Hello, can you hear me?" Yeah, like fucking horrific. Like, and it's all done to this John. It is,
but as violent cinema goes, we've seen a hell of a lot worse.
But and I would argue this: if you're going to do something horrific, you should be kind of like this, like make it kind of gross and not gratuitous, and make the message clear that what we're seeing is terrible.
So after that, he's pouring petrol all over him. And
that's got a sting as well, that fucking hell.
I know, because he's got an open wound. And then he's about to burn him, and Orange, basically, who's been lying bleeding out on the floor this whole time, is conscious and awake enough to just basically shoot Blonde. And we are getting into the final act of the film now, because that leads us right towards the denouement. But first off, we've got Orange's backstory. Now, it starts with Orange in a diner with, is that his boss, his handler? Doesn't come off as a police chief, does he?
No, I think it's like another undercover cop or inform of some kind. It's
somebody with deep cover experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Into auditioning for that role and not getting it, Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh, okay. I can see that.
Quentin remembered him, and the rest is history. I referred to that in an earlier film. He didn't get that role, but he kind of percolated around Quentin's head afterwards.
That reminds me as well, because also Robert Foster auditioned for a role in this film as well.
He auditioned for Joe. It would have been a very different film, but he could have been basically Joe Cabot.
And and he said the same things like, "Hey, you're not right for the part, but I'll remember you." Yeah.
And he did. So in the next two films, we get those people. Yeah. And they arguably they definitely had bigger careers with Quentin Tarantino than the people who ended up getting the roles. Lawrence Tierney was actually fired in the first week. They had to do a little bit of remedial work to get him back on board. He ended up in a punch-up with Quentin Tarantino.
Really?
Because his behaviour on set was so bad. There's stories about him on the set of Seinfeld as well, because he had a guesting role as, I think he may have been Elaine's dad in Seinfeld, but he had a guesting role in that. The guy had a drink problem and a history of violence as well, so he would be trouble. So whilst I know Quentin Tarantino is no angel himself, when you say those two had a punch-up, I know instinctively Lawrence Tierney caused that.
Well, he's not exactly a fighter, is he, Tarantino, for any of his criticisms, is he?
No, but I always get the impression he'll have a go, though. I always get the impression that, like, push comes to shove, why not? I'll have a try.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, if he did spit at someone, didn't he? So...
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, there are other stories as we go along through his career. That's what I mean by we'll see. But, so Orange's backstory is purely about preparing him to kind of fit in with with criminals as a policeman. And it's about trying to teach him that you've got to have stories in your armory about your career in crime, but those stories have to be layer upon layer of detail that you know instinctively and without pause, so that there's just no gaps in your story. And so he's basically being taught an anecdote about walking into a men's room with drugs on him. That's an anecdote, isn't it?
Yeah. But I guess it's how you tell the story. you build up the situation.
Well, that's exactly it, Chris. That's what they're trying to teach him.
Yeah.
That it's how you tell it. Anyone could go in and make up some stuff where all the details sound right.
Yeah. But it's building up all the kind of all the backstory and and all sorts. So yeah, I actually really like this part because it just builds up this kind of. It's almost like a method, like an actor explain acting, but not being an actor.
Well, he is.
Yeah,
he is really. He's totally explaining Tarantino's understanding of acting. And what I also love is the film doesn't really let up on the tension, and when it drops you back in to the warehouse, the tension is already there waiting for us. It almost doesn't need to build again, but these sections just take us out of it for a few minutes and gives us necessary backstory. I mean, we have had how they got their names and everything else as well, but Orange is basically, we think, a single police officer working undercover. It's acknowledged he's very, very brave to do this. It's also acknowledged he hasn't done a lot of this before. And just little sort of character beats, like his apartment's got Silver Surfer posters up and things like that.
And he makes reference of Fantastic Four as well, and
he does. He also makes a Pam Grier reference at one stage as well.
Yeah, there's talk about like, well, it wasn't Pam Grier, but who was it? I don't know. I just know it was Pam Grier.
Yeah, it was like. Yeah,
I've never even heard of the program, sadly.
I can't remember what this program was. I think she did the film version, and they were talking about the TV version, so it's analogous to like Irene Cara in Fame or something. But there's a niche.
There's a bit of trivia for you.
There's an up-to-date reference for all our listeners. I was referring to 1980s Fame. That's really about it, isn't it? It takes us right the way through to him telling the story, and then
you see them get their names.
Yeah.
Which
I think is neither here nor there, other than it's a bit of character as to like why and how did they get their names. So the whole point is nothing identifiable. The suits is entirely the point that I've heard him interviewed, and he said you'll get robberies where they're all wearing like Raiders jackets, and it just throws people off because when the police say what do they look like, I don't know, it's a bunch of Raiders jackets. So he put them in suits because he thought that was cool, but the idea of them in a matching clothing did have kind of a sort of verisimilitude to it.
Yeah.
And their names, it was purely like, we give you the name because otherwise you'll all fight over being Mr. Black, which is kind of a fair point, actually.
I like the idea of there can't be a Mr. Purple because there's already a purple on another job.
But I do wonder why is there Mr. Red? Why does it go straight to like pink, brown?
There's Mr. Red on another group, on another,
Yeah, but it just seems like, well, there isn't. Not necessarily.
Yeah,
not in this. Not that. Yeah, it just like seems like that seems a bit harsh. Mr. Brown, Mr. Pink, Mr.
It's just names. It could have been anything. It could have been characters from fucking Sesame Street. You know what I mean? But that would have got confusing. It's easy to remember colours as well.
Yeah.
Because I have never, since first viewing of this film, had any problems remembering which one's which.
Yeah.
I saw it. I go and see films I like, and sometimes I can't remember character names. I could tell you from the first viewing what all their colours were.
Yeah. It's something that, is quite iconic as well.
Yeah, it sticks. It sticks really well.
If you see Mr. Pink Don't Tip, you immediately know they're talking about Steve Buscemi's character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, another little sort of thing as well. You also get to even the bit when Tim Roth is telling the story. You kind of see the expressions on Harvey Keitel's face that he's kind of warming to him a little bit. He kind of, I like this guy, He feels like, and obviously you have that scene when they're like going through the robbery in the car. You get like it's you're seeing the bonding rather than having to be explained that these two are bonded. It's just little.
The other thing, of course, is they've got to skirt the fine line, because if Mr. White went up to him and said, "Actually, I'm called Larry Smith and I've got a wife and I've actually got 2 kids and I'm from Oakland," and so on, that would break the rules so far that you wonder if you could trust him. And the same would be true the other way. Tim Roth Orange has got to skirt this fine line of dropping in personal details so that he's trusted, but not dropping in so much that he's distrusted. And that's really masterfully written.
Especially because he's kind of like a mole within a mole.
Yeah, exactly that. I think it's outstanding.
He's very deep undercover.
Yeah. And then that's more or less the end of the film, because we come out of that to back into the warehouse where that pole of like tension just drops immediately again. He's lying there damaged, but
he explains to the cop. Yeah, he explains to the cop that like, look, we're just waiting for.
We're a block away. The police are a block away.
They're waiting for the boss to show up, and then obviously, so basically, he's like, all I have to do is hold them off with as crappy an explanation as possible. It doesn't matter. Hold them off enough so the boss gets here, and then once that happens, we'll be good. The police will come in.
But of course, the worst person he could have shot is blonde.
Yeah.
Because that's the one Joe trusts and nice guy Eddie trusts. So because he's been nuts in the wholesalers, they assume that they can pin it on him and go, well, he's nuts.
Yeah.
And of course they've gone, oh, he started shooting the place up or whatever. And they just go, well, he just did 4 years for us. Fuck off.
That doesn't make sense. And you think, shit, it doesn't, does it?
It doesn't. And there's no argument to it. And he goes, well, I swear on my mother's grave or something like that. Or my mother's eternal soul, he says. Yeah. And it's like, do you know what? I think I know this character well enough to know his mother must already be dead or something like that. He's sworn on something that's of no consequence. He must have. But so immediately we get to the standoff, which is taken from that Asian film. I forget the name of it. Which film did he copy for that bit?
Oh, Ring of Fire, probably.
Right, okay.
Ring of Fire.
It's not Ring of Fire. It's City on Fire.
City on Fire, yes.
City on Fire, that's it.
That's it. I have seen that, but long time ago. So we end up with Joe goes to point the gun at Orange because he says he's the one I'm not sure about, and I shouldn't have taken him onto the job. It's my fault. White then, in a misplaced sort of paternal kind of protection of Orange and the bonding they've had, points one at Joe, and then Eddie, instinctively trying to protect his father, and it is his dad because he says stop pointing the gun at my dad, points the gun at White. So you've now got a standoff. The only one that doesn't have a gun on him, actually, theoretically, and I say theoretically because something goes wrong in the execution, is Eddie.
Yes. Basically, everything gets hyped up. Who shoots first? Is it? It must be the what's his name?
Do you know what actually happened?
Joe.
One of Harvey Keitel's squib went off. That's what happened. It was an error. It wasn't meant to happen. But because you've got Pink under the stairs, hidden in what could be in sight of it, I've always assumed it was him till I read it was a mistake. I always thought Pink shot Eddie from his sort of hidden vantage point.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. The point is they're all basically shot at the same time. Joe and Eddie are killed outright, and then you've just got White's still alive, but he's injured.
Yeah, and Pink just goes fuck and then runs out.
Takes the diamonds and fucks off.
Yeah. Assuming he gets caught by the police outside, though. The
police are right outside because they're straight on to Mr. White, aren't they?
Yeah. And then you kind of Orange for some reason then confesses, even though what's the fucking point now? But he does, just out of conscience.
His conscience. That's
yeah.
What it is.
And yeah, he's kind of like, oh no, not again, and he contemplates whether to shoot him or not, and the police come in, and
of course he's got a gun at one of their own's head as well, yeah. So it just becomes, they take him out effectively as we cut to black.
Does he shoot him though as well? Because I've read it in the terms of like, well, let's fuck it, let's die together.
I don't know. Is the honest answer. I think White is definitely shot because you see him sort of lurch backwards, but who knows? I don't suppose it matters at this stage because by now Orange was already dying and he's been shot a second time. So I'm at least. So I don't think his chances are good as it is. And then I love the song they go to at the end because it's just like
a lime in the cooking and a lime.
Yeah, but it's got references to like a bellyache and things like that, and of course he's been shot in the gut.
Or is it because she's pregnant?
No, it's because Orange is shot. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's because the woman. I don't know. I majorly misread that song. I always thought it was because she was pregnant, but maybe not.
It's the relevance of the song of the album to this film and this part of the film.
Exactly.
It's
so if you think that's because it's about bellyache and because he's been shot in the belly, then clearly that's on the on a par with on a par with my comment about the titles being orange and orange is the rat.
Well, no, they're not at all. Because they just chose a colour that looked kind of cool at the start of the film.
It's kind of 70s.
That was actually more gold than orange anyway. At this point of the film, he has to pick a film to close it that's 70s.
Exactly, so he goes for that one.
And he picks Coconut by Harry Nilsson because it's just got a funny line about
Because it's very 70s.
having a bellyache. Yeah. Great film, this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose we should have done, like, this out of sequence. Should have done, like, fun facts, talk about the film sequentially, final thoughts, first thoughts.
I should talk a load of shit, and then later on you get, like, a scene that shows you how I learned to talk shit.
Yeah. Yeah, there's you getting taught by your mentor of how you be able to talk.
Yeah. It would be Pai Mei. Pai Mei would be teaching me dick jokes in the mountains.
And at some point there'll be like cut to a Skype conversation with me and Becca talking about bonds, and then be all kinds of stuff.
So Dave, when we go live in a minute and you tell the story about shitting yourself on the M6, you've got to make it naturalistic as hell, baby.
Make him believe that they were there. So, final thoughts. If we've not expressed our final thoughts already, really.
I think we kind of have, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's out of, because it's his first film as well. I think it's just the title of his films. There's not a lot of meat on it, but then there doesn't need to be any meat on it. It's basically all kind of engrossment in the characters and as Dave says, about loyalty and trust. And it just works really, really well. The violence is done just right. The dialogue is great. The dialogue just tells the story rather than the action. There are parts in it that you can kind of tell that it's a very independent film, but for the most part, it's really great. Generally really, really good first film, and to be honest, I think it stands the test of time as a classic in terms of setting a new genre of film.
I think I've said everything I can possibly say through this film now. That for the first time ever, I'm not going to add any final thoughts. I've said everything. Becca?
Yeah, I think I've said everything too.
Yeah, it's just set the occult mark in pop culture. That's pretty much what Reservoir Dogs did. Reservoir Dogs, yeah.
It is to the film industry what Nirvana was to music.
Yes.
What Nevermind was. I would argue far more influential, actually, because I think Nevermind is importance is kind of overstated. But
well, to be fair,
over time.
Tarantino didn't blow his head off with a shotgun, so
No, he didn't.
To be fair, but yeah,
and not only that, like I kind of quite like the Foo Fighters.
Well, I love both. I love Nirvana and Foo Fighters equally.
Yeah. Oh,
I have 104.
Oh, this is pretty good.
And I have 104 friends. Are we all here?
We're all here.
Okay. I heard something. I thought someone fell off their chair. So. No,
I knocked my microphone over. I was so excited about.
Yeah.
It was.
Oh, right. Having 104 friends. Yeah.
That is damn exciting.
But yeah, no, it's Reservoir Dogs, people. So, any fun facts, Becca?
Couple really.
Only a couple? Oh, come on.
Yeah, I've got 5.
They might be, that's the standard number then. Cool.
In a 2009 interview, Tarantino said that he's proud of his film regularly appearing in top 10 heist movies when you don't actually see the heist, so that's pretty cool. Fun fact number 2, obviously we were talking about the budget earlier and how low it was.
Hang on, sorry Becca, sorry to stop you, but is that actually a list? Heist movies where you don't actually see the heist?
No, like for example...
oh, okay, sorry.
No.
Film magazines regularly do like top 10 heist movies or top 10 lists.
Okay.
It's effectively a heist movie where you don't see the heist.
Okay.
She's saying it got into the top 10 heist film list without even having the heist in it.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
that there's a list in there that's called Best Heist Movies
That's
with
why
no
we didn't see the
heist.
heist.
That's what I thought I had to
Best
clarify
porn,
because
best porn with no nudity.
Fun fact number 2, the budget didn't cater for traffic control or police assistance. So the scene where Mr. Pink, I was going to say, pulls a woman out of the car, removes a woman from her car, had to be done on a red light, and he could only drive away on a green light. Fun fact number 3, Tarantino tends to avoid product placement, and he only uses brands that are no longer around. Like, for example, when Mr. White offers Mr. Pink a just-filled cigarette. Fun fact number 4.
He does invent his own brands as we go along, because we see
He does.
Apple cigarettes throughout.
Red Apple.
Yeah, he makes up his
Red
own
Apple,
brands, or uses brands that haven't been around, like, or 1950s or 60s brands that are no longer with us. I think I did see. Oh, this is probably back in the very early 2000s. There was like an online store selling merch like with these fake brands on it, which is quite interesting. I don't think it's around anymore. But yeah, fun fact number 4: Empire magazine voted it the best ever independent film. I don't know if that has changed at all. And fun fact number 5: editor Sally Menken agent lobbied for her not to make this film, claiming it was so violent, and nobody knew Tarantino where he came from. And obviously she went on to edit his first 6 films.
Yes, I alluded to a change in the pacing of Tarantino films, and it's the loss of Sally Menke that causes that. We'll get to it.
Also, Tarantino was originally going to play Mr. Pink, but
Was he now?
yeah.
Which
Which kind of makes sense because Mr. Pink is very Tarantino-esque.
totally. I could see it.
What I did think about is why hasn't Steve Buscemi been in more Tarantino stuff?
Yeah, I used to do more.
Yeah, he's got a cameo next week, and that's it.
Yeah, I just think it just seems such a match. It's like, well, you put Steve Buscemi in a Tarantino film. It just seems like an odd thing.
Buscemi is the bride.
Well, he's got the looks.
Yeah. Wiggle your big toe.
Has he got the touch?
And apparently Michael Madsen had difficulty doing his that infamous torture scene because he doesn't like violence that much.
Actually,
Oh, really?
there was a point I read because there's this little bit of improvisation in this script, not a huge amount.
okay.
In the script, sorry, on the set there was a little bit of improvisation, and the line about I don't even remember if it's in the final film in this form, but Marvin says about having a kid at home. Says he's an 18-year-old kid. Michael Madsen had a very young child at the time, and he had to stop. He just momentarily thought about it too literally, and couldn't continue the scene.
Which apparently is actually in the film as well. Part of that is in the film.
What, the pause and all that?
Yeah.
I meant to look out for it today because I was actually reading stuff earlier and then watched the film and didn't give that bit of thought.
But it could be down to... It could have easily been played off because he does pause a lot in terms of sort of like, yeah, I'm just going to just take my time with this. Which kind of adds to it, I guess. That's it, isn't it?
I think that's a wrap, folks. Yeah, I think that we've said everything we can say on it. I think kind of that will probably be our tightest episode of the series, which is kind of appropriate given the film.
Yeah, I mean, I was concerned because of the nature when it came to talking about film sequentially in terms of how the film kind of goes back on itself all the time. It's like, oh, okay, this.
But it doesn't actually, though. I mean, it does.
Yeah.
But that hour in the warehouse is actually linear. So if you just think of it as an hour with little cutaway stories to augment how they got there, I don't actually think of it as anywhere near as disjointed as Pulp Fiction is.
It's not, and then Pulp Fiction is 3 separate stories, isn't it, really?
But even then, they've got overlapping timelines and stuff like that. So Pulp Fiction can be a difficult film to piece together.
Yeah.
I don't find it that difficult, but I know a lot of people do.
Once we get out of it, well, as if we're going to sort of like, once we get out of Pulp Fiction, once we get that out of the way, it's pretty more, more linear, isn't it?
It does get much more straightforward, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, Kill Bill 1's a little. The Kill Bill films are slightly out of sequence as well, but they signpost where they are, and that's more about pacing of a film.
Yeah,
that's more about It's acknowledging that in real life things aren't necessarily going to happen in the most cinematic sequence. So the events happen in like a normal sort of life order, and then he rearranges them into a more cinematic order and then points it out to us. It's kind of cool, but we'll talk about it when we get there.
So, social media, guys.
Yeah, okay, you can find me at ThePastyKid1976 on Twitter.
You can find me at Cinematronics on Twitter. You can find this website at cinematronics.co.uk, where you can find this podcast and the other podcast, which I rarely update.
The podcast I didn't update podcast.
Yes, the to be continued podcast that you might find occasionally, but yeah, you can find any stuff at that website.
Sorry, I wasn't really listening, but I caught the end of that, so can I just instinctively do my normal reflex action of coming soon, Summer Review 2018?
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about doing maybe like an end of year review, but we'll see if we can manage to do that. But yeah.
Yeah. We haven't said which year.
So, David, what do you think of 1954?
I thought it was disappointing because Marty McFly hadn't invented rock and roll yet.
Becca?
1954.
Great Scott. What?
Or rather, 1983. Selena Scott.
Yes, you can follow us on Twitter at Expect to Talk. Also, we're also on iTunes and Stitcher. If you're on iTunes, type in "Do you expect us to talk?" And you can also give us a glowing 5-star review, as it'll help us rank higher and attract more listeners. You can also search for us on the YouTube. If you search in "Do you expect us to talk?" and find us there. And we also expect us to talk on Facebook. And if you want to, you can email us.
Grindr.
No, sadly, we're not on Grindr, and we're not on Tinder either.
All right then.
Because we are all spoken for. Thank you very much. By our fans and our listeners.
I was going to say, nice backpedal.
Married to the podcast.
Although Chris is currently available.
I tell you what, my heart jumped.
Am I?
I tell you what, right, my heart jumped
Are
in
you?
my fucking throat when she said that.
So, where's that link?
I figure either of you are always trying to like pair us off, so I'm like, oh, Chris is available. So
Who am I trying to pair off?
no, it's just the last couple of podcasts are always like, oh, trying to pair us off, but it's like no.
You've lost me, but all right.
Yeah. It's never mind. So Becky, you're saying you're not single anymore?
That's none of your business.
Okay, that's a yes.
Hang on a minute. What do you mean it's none of her business? If you knew that, she must have told you. In which case, it was your business. Why has it suddenly not become your business?
I did tell you a couple of podcasts ago. Listen.
What, you want
I
me to
listened
go
to
back?
all
Why
your
would I
news.
go back and listen to podcasts when I could just ask you now?
I'm not going to bloody tell you. I told you before. Anyway.
So that's a yes anyway.
Look what this idiot did in America.
No.
Oh, we're doing Alan Partridge references. That's perfect, actually.
Well, no, it's just trying to keep, personal and public kind of separate, really, isn't it? So.
Yeah, but you know I don't do that.
Well, you don't. I do.
Yeah, I know. But good luck with that. Chris is still laughing.
So am I.
Chris, are you all right?
I'm okay. Yeah.
Good. Right. Okay. Okay. Episode 102, Becca. In a week's time, we shall be.
Do you expect us to talk or return with Pulp Fiction, motherfuckers?
Pulp Fiction, motherfucker.